Can't more, bark less. Glad you're here. And in this episode here, we're going to be repairing the AC line that burst. If you remember when we went up on our first trip of 2018, the AC system exploded. Now when I say exploded, I mean exploded. The line burst. Oh man, look at all the dye. Holy cow. Oh, it's dripping off the... And I think it was 6 pounds of Freon, or refrigerant actually, that actually spewed out in 10 seconds. So I consider that a pretty good explosion. And what we're going to be doing is going over how to get the line ordered, how to make a line, get fittings. You can't just go to AutoZone and order a part for an RV like this. Can't go to the manufacturer because the manufacturer is out of business. So you have to either go to an AC shop and have them make the line, or you have to make it yourself, and I have the tools to do that. So we're going to be covering that in today's video. Before we get started too far, I want to go over the wrenches that we're going to use. These are called line wrenches, and let me show you the differences. This is a line wrench, and you can see it has that extra little piece that returns back here, and it also has the 6 point down here compared to an open-end wrench, which just has your two sides that are going to be making the bite on the nut that you're going to be trying to loosen. These are meant to not strip out lines. If you have any lines that are extremely tight, you'll have a really good chance of rounding off the line, the nut part of the line, with using an open-end wrench. And you obviously can't fit this over the line. Well, you could when you first put it together, and you just have to leave the wrench on there. If you have an abundance of wrenches, go ahead and knock yourself out. But this is what you use these for. Okay, let's go outside and get started. So the hose that we need to replace is right over here on the one side of the receiver. It goes from here down to the condenser. We need to remove this nut. We're going to end up getting a new receiver because we're going to have the system open. But here you can see the duct tape that I tried to seal up the hole to keep any moisture from getting in there. And then the hose runs all the way down to right there. So we got to take it off there without breaking the condenser. And this is how the line wrench works. The opening here slips over the line just like that. And once you get it off, then you can just use a regular open-end wrench to quickly unscrew it. We want to cap that off just to keep any moisture from getting in there. Alright, now we'll get a cap on there. Now all we gotta do is cut zip ties and pull this line out. Let me cut through this duct tape that I put on there to keep the moisture and dirt and stuff from getting inside the AC system. And there we have it. This is what we're gonna have to make. Looks like it could be a little shorter. They had it all squished up. It is hot outside, so I had to come inside. But remember, you can always use the RV countertop as your workbench until your wife finds out. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take off this duct tape I put on when we were up in Virginia, just to keep any moisture to some degree from getting back into the system. I was glad that when we pulled the hose off, the first fitting, it actually still had a little bit of pressure left in it, so that was a good sign. I'd rather it have some pressure in it than it be under a vacuum sucking in stuff from the outside. So let's go ahead and take this tape off and see where it ruptured. I'm just amazed at how dry rotted this hose is, where all the other hoses are not dry rotted. But right there is where it blew out. So what we have to do is cut this hose in half, see what size it is inside and out, because they have different outside diameters and different inside diameters. That's how AC hoses are done. Then we need to go ahead and figure out what size the fittings are and order all that stuff. And I'll show you how we do that. So let's go ahead and cut this thing in half. Now we need to measure the inside and the outer side diameter of this, and then we'll know which size hose it is, and then we'll know what size fittings we need. Okay, I got my trusty digital dial caliper. So what we're gonna do, take the hose, we're gonna measure the outside. Alright, that's really close to 3/4. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna write down on my list 3/4 for the outside. Now let's measure the inside. Oh, and if you don't know this about dial calipers, this is for measuring the outside of things, and this is for measuring inside. And you can see they spread apart, so this distance between here equals the same distance between there. So we're right at 5/16. So we'll write that down, and then we'll look online on the chart, and then it'll tell us what size this is. I think this is a number 6 standard barrier hose, but we'll have to check on the chart. Now I need to measure what these fitting sizes are. It looks like 9/16. So I'll write that down. You can see we got an O-ring right there. The new fittings come with that new O-ring.
So let's take a look at where I go to buy these AC fittings. Go to a company called Cold Hose. And there's a reason why I go to them. And the main reason is I've never had a problem when I order parts from them, but I get them really fast because they're just in Ocala. So let's go over the hose sizes first. Alright, so here's standard barrier hose. This here is a 5/16 inner diameter is what we measured with the dial caliper, and 3/4 of an inch outside diameter, which is also what we measured. So our hose was a number 6 size standard barrier hose. Now what I want to do is I want to show you there's another number 6 size hose, and this is called a reduced barrier hose. And the difference is, this is why I was telling you that you have to measure both inside and outside diameter, because what the difference is, the inside's 5/16, the same size as the standard barrier hose, but now the outside diameter right here, 39/64, is about 1/8 of an inch smaller. So this hose is about 1/16 of an inch less thick than the standard barrier hose. This hose here is used in places where they need to make a tight bend. You can bend this stuff a little bit tighter. I'm going to go ahead and just use a standard barrier hose and replace it with the same exact type of hose that was on there originally. And because we don't need to bend it, it's going straight. So that's the first thing we need to know. What size hose and what type of hose. Standard barrier, number 6. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to come down to fittings. Now here's 3 different types of AC fitting. And this chart here helps you identify what type of fitting you have. We don't have a flare, but I do want to show you something here. The difference here between rigid and swivel. Rigid means that the line is mounted solid to this nut part here with the threads. So that means you cannot put a wrench on this part and rotate it, or you'll break whatever the line is that's connected to it. So the second one is the tube's separate inside here, and this nut will actually rotate over top of this tube. And then there's your flare right there. And then same thing with the male fittings. You got this part here is rigid. In other words, this nut part does not rotate from what you don't see here, which is be a line or an evaporator or whatnot that's connected to it. This is all one piece. So you can only put a wrench on here to hold it from breaking the line. Whereas this one here, this nut from here to the threaded part is separate. So this tube is inside and this nut will slide up around on top of this tube and you can rotate this nut. Now let's look at the third one, which is a spring lock. This is very common in a lot of Ford vehicles. This has got a spring up inside here. That's what I call it, a spring lock. And then this little lip right here, the spring, when you push it, you push this part inside of here, and then this bigger part goes over top of this. And then the spring will stretch and go over and snap back into this area here and hold the pieces together. You need a special tool that you slip over top of it. It goes up inside here, pushes on the spring, and then you can pull these pieces apart. Now we know we don't have this and we don't have the flare. What's left is female O-ring or male insert O-ring. So same thing as the flared, you got two different ones. This one here, these are both swivel, but this one right here, you can see, well, they got it listed as braze welded, but this nut is actually part of this tube. So again, this nut cannot rotate. Now this one here, the nut can rotate on the tube. It's actually separate. So we know our fittings are this type of fitting right here. Remember we had the green O-ring right there on the little lip, and then this part here slides back and forth on our tube. One is going to screw onto the evaporator, another one's going to screw onto the receiver. Now the receiver is made like this, and so is the evaporator, where it is part of the tubes. So now let's go ahead and take a look at what we're actually going to order. Okay, now we're in the fittings, and same thing. They break them down into the 3 different types, and then they got metric over here by themselves. So we know we're going to be an O-ring fitting. We're not going to be the spring disconnect, and we're not going to be flare. So we're going to go to the O-ring. All right, now you got a female O-ring, a male O-ring, and a male insert O-ring. So we have to take a look at these just to see what we have here. We know that this part here is a male with threads on the outside of the fitting. Ours was not like that. Ours had the nut on it with the threads on the inside. So we know that we're not this one, we're not this one, we're this one. So we're female O-ring. All right, now it breaks it down even more. We have these two here, you can see here in red, are reduced barrier. And then these are standard barrier, okay? So there's 2 different ends to this fitting. There's this end here that goes onto the hose, whether it be a standard barrier or a reduced barrier. And then this end here, they have all different sizes to screw onto whatever it's connecting up to. And then we have bead lock and steel bead lock. And now the original fittings that we took off, I know were aluminum. The tube was aluminum, and let's get down to what that looks like. This tube right here was aluminum, so I know that we're this one right here, just a regular bead lock. So we're going to come on down. I know I need a straight fitting, and I need a 90 degree. Here's our straight one. Now we have a choice of 4 number 6s. So if you look here, this is the fitting end, this is the hose end. Fitting end being a number 6 translates to 5/8 of an inch with 18 thread per inch count on the thread pitch. So that will tell you that this part here is a number 6, and then this hose end is a number 6, because we know our hose that we're going to order is going to be a number 6 standard barrier. So here's the reduced barrier version of that, which means it has the same nut on it, but this part here is for a reduced barrier hose. So this one here and this one here are the same nut size, except the difference is just the hose size. And then the difference here between these two here and these two is that these are the steel ones and these are the aluminum ones. We're going to go ahead and order this one here for the straight for the bottom, and then we're going to go ahead and 90 degree, and there's our 90 degree turn. And again, you got 4 number 6s. The top 2 here are the aluminums, the bottom ones here are the steel, and the first one here is standard barrier. This is reduced barrier, standard barrier, reduced barrier. So we're looking at the hose end, number 6. The fitting end we know is a number 6, same size, 5/8 and 18 threads per inch. We'll go ahead and order that. And then we're going to continue shopping. And what we're going to look for now is hose by the foot. All right. We don't want reduced barrier, we want standard barrier. Standard barrier number 6, 5/16 barrier AC hose per foot. I need 2 feet. So there you go. There's our one fitting for the bottom of the hose. This is the one that's going to go onto the receiver dryer, and there's our hose. Now you can see it's fairly inexpensive. You know, you're looking at $16, and it's probably going to be about $10 to ship it. I'll go ahead and order it, and when the parts come, we'll go ahead and put it together. In part 2, we actually use the crimper and make the AC hose. So click the link either down in the description or up here on the screen, and it'll take you to part 2, or click the subscribe button, and in that way you'll be able to find our video when you have more time to watch part 2. And I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you learned something about ordering AC fitting parts, and see you in part 2.